My name's Mary. Welcome. This is our space. This is my home. When you do have a small amount of space, you have to be very intentional about what you grow and where you grow it and why you're growing everything. A little bit that was like what came up with the idea for me to start growing microgreens, because the best I had was like just this tiny small amount of plot, but I wanted to be able to like sustain myself through farming. Why it worked for me growing in such a small environment was that the like growth cycle on a microgreen is like 5 days. When it's like long, hot days, microgreens will grow in 5 days. In the winter, it's more like can be up to 40 days. But because the turnover was like so quickly, I was able to grow lots in a short amount of time, and like almost every week I was starting a new batch and I was able to like learn quickly. Versus like when I was growing like cabbage, for example, cabbage is like 120 to 150 days. If I made some mistakes in growing cabbage, well then like maybe I could do that twice a year, maybe, you know? I was able to make a lot of mistakes and learn from my mistakes kind of quickly with microgreens because of the short cycle. When I first started growing microgreens, I started out with just a few varieties. The easier microgreens that I would suggest starting out with might be like radish, broccoli, pea shoots, and then we do grow sunflowers. Sunflowers is a nice one to start out with. They're just time consuming because you have to take the seed hole. But really I would say I would go based on like what's interesting to you. You know, like if you're interested in eating like wasabi microgreens, then grow those. What's great, some of you all mentioned like health benefits of microgreens, full of nutrients, like phytonutrients. Some of them have protein, like some of them you can get, it's like a living source of vitamin D. That antioxidant that's in blueberries that people really like, that specific one. If you eat broccoli microgreens, there's like 40 to 60 times the amount of that antioxidant than eating blueberries, which just is wild. I'll start with just how we grow. There's different ways that you can grow microgreens. I'm just gonna show you the way I know how and the way that I've sort of, like the system that I've set up to work for me. So I use these trays, which this is like a regular 10 by 20 tray, but you'll notice this is like a very shallow tray. So like there's maybe like an inch of soil, like at the most, that goes in there. I use kind of just like a compost mix. So like this is I'm gonna harvest tomorrow. This is arugula. This is like full grown arugula in my mind. Full grown microgreen arugula, I'll say that. And so I'm just gonna pull up this corner here and you can see sort of like, see all those roots, like see how that's like, yeah, nice and settled there. If you can just imagine like cutting the whole top of this tray, then I will just have like this, like all these roots and maybe like a little bit of stem. And then what we do is we dump them all into a big pile that has worms in it, and the worms just break it down. In a couple of weeks, it's just soil again, ready for us to use. So we're able to like kind of close that loop. The next thing I'll say is about seeds. So then we got the medium, then we're gonna put down the seeds. You'll notice like I seed pretty heavy. So like that's a lot of seeds. Like it depends on the variety of seeds, but it's like, I would say like 1 to 4 ounces of seed on each tray. So the 4 ounces is probably more like the sunflower because it's bigger, heavier seed. But then yeah, like this, I don't know what fenugreek is. I used to weigh everything out before we did it, but now we just kind of do it by eye. So one thing I will say about buying seed is that like when I first started, I tried a lot of things, and now I just buy the nice seed. I buy good seed. I buy like organic if I can. And I do that, one, because I believe in organic and want to do that and want to give my customers great product. And also because it's just really good seeds. So like if you like growing in like a small, intense growing system that we have, I want to be like maximizing like everything that I harvest, right? So like I'll even be like, we'll have a tray that like will have like bad germination. I'm like, get it out of here, because I really want every single tray to have yielding a lot of microgreens, if that makes sense. The places where I buy microgreens, I would that I was suggesting were like True Leaf Market tends to have like a little like better prices than Johnny's Seeds, and Johnny's Seeds are like I would say more expensive, known for being more expensive, but fantastic germination on all their stuff. Speaking of germination, like I said, I want everything to grow well. This section right here, do you see how I have it covered in plastic? This is, I can take it off now. I think we're ready to take it off. But in the wintertime, this was my like germination chamber, I called it. So when you're a microgreen grower, you're actually just an expert germinator, or you need to be. Like, you need everything to germinate and to grow. So I use this space where I can close it off and put heat in there and sort of regulate the temperature, like at like a germination rate. I'd say like best germination, they say, is between like 68 or like 68 and 76 or something like that. Well, when it's -10 outside or even 20 outside, it's a little hard to do that. So this helps. And I use infrared heaters, like infrared heat that like I just plug in here, and it keeps it all good. I seal up the greenhouse really well in the wintertime, plus the infrared heat. When we plant, I don't cover them with dirt. Like if I was planting in my garden, I would take the seed, and my rule for planting in the garden was always like as deep as like thick as the seed is. Yeah, I put at least that much dirt on top of it. But with microgreens, I don't put any dirt on top because it makes for like a cleaner growing cut. But for some of the seeds do like the darkness, like that's why you cover the seed, for like the darkness. Some microgreens need to be like blacked out more than others. Some don't need it at all. And actually some, this is like the hard part because there's no regular way. Some actually I don't stack at all. So some I just literally put on top of the soil and don't even cover it. Watering and humidity are two really big things. Like, it's really hard. The way I grow, that is the one, if I could change one thing about this situation setup, is I would do something for humidity. The hard part is I want really good airflow and air movement throughout the greenhouse. When it's 95 outside and like 90% humidity, I definitely need like air movement, because otherwise like molding will happen. And then sometimes just like really thick, like a really thick tray like this one or something, just like it'll start getting mucky because it'll too much moisture. So you really have to balance that. And when I was first trying to figure out microgreens, I was like, oh, I'm gonna get like an automated watering system, and like I'm just gonna like press a button and like water pops out of the greenhouse. Like, I don't know. I was like, I was like kind of, I geeked out on it for a while looking into things, and then I kept being like, but what microgreen farmers are actually doing that? And actually not very many, because watering is actually a really important task. Like, it's actually, you have to really pay attention when you're watering. It's a detailed task. You have to make sure like water, like if I'm watering the surface, right, but I miss this area, you know, then like then like this part of it in the summertime when it's really hot would die, like the corner edge, and I want all the trays to be really vibrant. If it's overcast and really humid, then you don't need to water. So that was why I could never get an automated system, because you literally have to like come and check, like, you know, even like every day I'm like, okay, do these need water? Like, no. If it's waterlogged, like, let me see if I can show you one. Like, this doesn't need water, I can tell. Like, you can just tell, you can look at it. See, that's just soil that's wet, you know? So it doesn't need water. Something like, the bigger the plant too, I would say, the more water it needs, you know, because these are ready to be harvested. So yeah, you can just tell that's drier. That's drier, and those need water, and I'll probably water those tonight. But you can even see, it's so tricky. Look at that, doesn't really need water, but this side needs water. That's why it's just really hard to tell. But too much water will kill your plants, so don't overwater. That's what I'll say. Not enough will kill your plants. So it's kind of, you got to find that medium. For a while I was using like a mister nozzle, but actually I just used a regular like shower nozzle. Like it would probably be considered like shower on, like if you had one of those like different handles. So these trays, sometimes I'll bottom water. And like if it's very humid, and for particular varieties, I would say like arugula, mizuna, some like in the summertime when I'm trying to grow plants that like cooler weather, I still do it, and I'm able to pull it off because I'm harvesting it really young. So I just have to get it to this stage. But this can get mucky in like a humid environment like St. Louis. So sometimes I'll bottom water. So then when I bottom water, I just literally pour, you know, some people on the internet just like take a cup of water and just like pour it in the tray. I just use a hose because it's what I have, but I'll just like fill up like this much water in there and then slide this in there. And then the tray will just absorb the water from there. So if you're doing it inside, I would suggest bottom watering. That makes your job easier, especially if you're doing it in a vehicle, you know, then you don't have to be like spraying like inside your vehicle. You literally could just like take a cup and dump water in here, and then you could water it. Yeah, they don't need that much light.
Like
they actually
they
actually indirect light they can do. Like well, if you're doing it in a basement or if you're doing it in a, I mean, they need some light. That's part of like the balance. I'm always like moving stuff around. I'm kind of figuring out what does better with sun. Some stuff like I don't want. This is fennel up here. This is kind of like a finer microgreen, so like I feel like it does better getting more exposure to light.
Mary, can you talk a little bit about any insect or disease issues with growing?
Oh, yeah. I would say in terms of insect and disease, we don't so much have to worry about that because the life cycle is so short. By the time any insect is going to get to this, I'm going to cut it, you know? The things that we do have to worry about is like mold, though. Like, I think the people who really struggle with mold are doing more indoor growing in situations with maybe not a lot of light, not a lot of air movement. I haven't ever had to worry about that. So we wash on like big bins. I put like a bin bigger than this size that fits on here. We fill it up with water. Like I said, a 3-wash system. The middle bin has the sanitizer, and then the other bin, the other 2 bins just have water. And we basically like grab the microgreens, put them in this bin, put them in that bin, then we spin them dry, and then I take a towel, which I have in here, and I'll lay it out on a towel. For a while I was putting them directly on this, and then that didn't really make sense. The towels kind of make it easier, and we can just wash and reuse them. So then, yeah, we lay the microgreens out really thinly on the towel and then turn these fans on. So we'll have like three fans that kind of go across here, and then the microgreens dry. And that's just kind of like just a fast, efficient way to get them dried, so then we can pack them. So then we pack them in these and put them in there. When I sell to restaurants or to farmers market, we just pack them in a bag. We'll weigh it out on a scale before we pack it, and then we just put it in a bag. That's for kind of like bigger, more bulk wholesale stuff like that. And then, yeah, the sanitizer we use, I buy it in like a really big jug, and so we just keep it in this small amount, and it's hydrogen peroxide. It's powerful stuff. You don't want to have that touch your raw hand because it can it'll burn you a little bit like that way. So we just put like a tiny bit, like I did a lot of research trying to figure out like how much, and as far as I could tell, people were always just like, oh, beep. That was what came of all the research. So that's what we do too. And then we just keep them in a fridge. Yeah, we have like a fridge just over there. Yeah. A lot of the mistakes I made at the beginning, I was grateful to just like always getting to try again, you know? Like I think sort of I could get like in my head a little bit about it, how it's like, oh, this is like repetitive, or this is boring, or like kind of the negative things I would tell me. This isn't real farming. Like, you know, I think I could get lost down like a little trail there if I really wanted, and I have before. But actually, I do think that growing microgreens makes a lot of sense in my situation for sure. And I think I was glad to make the mistakes and keep trying. And it is like repetitive in that like I'm always planting and harvesting, but actually between the seasons changing, it's not actually that repetitive the way that we do it, because we grow in a greenhouse, so the seasons change and we're able to try out different varieties of stuff. Like right now we're growing cilantro, later we'll do basil and popcorn and mung bean and just different kinds of stuff, so we can mix stuff up just a little bit.